Hello dear students, welcome back again to Chinmoy's YouTube channel. So here today we are with the third part of reproduction in plants. So previously in both the episodes we have spoken about vegetative propagation by artificial methods and vegetative propagation by natural methods. And today we are here with a new episode of reproduction in plants, and today we are going to discuss about sexual reproduction in plants. So without any delay, let us start with today's episode. So what are the learning objectives of today's lesson? So today we are going to learn that sexual reproduction in plants, the structure and parts of a typical flower. So this you have already studied in previous classes also. Again in bit details we are going to study today. We are going to study about self and cross pollination, the agents of pollination, what is artificial pollination, what is the process of fertilization, and what is germination of seeds. So if you want to learn and go through all the parts which I am discussing today, please do subscribe to my channel for the updates which I'll be posting, and for today's lesson also in details, please do subscribe and don't forget to like and share my videos, and don't forget to write in the comment box whatever queries, whatever doubts you are having. So let us start with today's episode of sexual reproduction in plants. So what does this term sexual reproduction means? The term sexual reproduction is a common method of reproduction in flowering plants. So how is it happening? Now seeds are produced as a result of sexual reproduction and which germinate and grow into new plants. Okay, so in this type of reproduction seeds are produced, and as a result of sexual reproduction we know which is germinating and the seeds are growing into new plants. So first let us discuss about the structure of a flower. Now here we can see the flower. This is a typical complete flower I have taken. So now generally the flowers, what are they? Flowers are the organs of reproduction in seed bearing plants. So flowers are organs of reproduction. So flowers are organs of reproduction in a seed bearing plant, and they are called, these seed bearing plants are called angiosperms. Okay, so the plants which do not bear seeds are called gymnosperms, and the plants with bear seeds are called angiosperms. So organs of reproduction in seed bearing plants are called angiosperms. Now the function of the flower is what? The function of the flower is to form seeds. So the main function of the flower is to form seeds. And seeds, they germinate and they develop into new plants. So what these seeds are doing, they are germinating and they are developing into new plants. So they germinate and they develop into new plants. Now we can say that in different plants the flowers are differing in the size, shape, color, but they are having the most common structure is same. So what are the most important common structure? We can say that the most of the flowers, they are having 4 holes. Okay, all the flowers are having 4 holes. That is, we can say that calyx, corolla, androecium and gynoecium, these are the 4 main holes of a flower. So if a flower is having all these 4 holes, that is called a complete flower. So what is the outermost hole? The outer 2 holes, they comprise of the calyx and the corolla. So the calyx, it's also called the sepals. We can say this calyx is also called the sepals, and the corolla is also called the petals. Okay, so calyx, we all know that calyx is also called the sepals and corolla is also called the petals. So this is the calyx part, or what we have written as sepals here. Now here comes the corolla part, that is the petal we have written here. Okay, so first is the calyx, this is the calyx, that is the sepal. Then comes the corolla, that is the petal. Okay, then next to it comes the androecium, that is the male part which consists the stamen part. This is the androecium, that is the male part. So this is the androecium, and next comes the gynoecium, or the female part, that is the pistil. So it is the gynoecium. So this is the gynoecium, or the female part, or we can say that it comprises of the pistil. So male part is stamen and the female part is pistil. So is it clear to everyone? So I have tried my best to make it clear. Just remember the outermost part is calyx or sepal, then comes the petal or the corolla, then we can say that the androecium or the stamen part comes, which is the male part of the flower. This is the male part of the flower, and then comes gynoecium or the pistil. So this is the female part of the flower. So is it clear to everyone? Now these all, they are taking part in reproduction, and this is the structure of typical flower. And this is very important diagram. Please do learn this diagram with all these labelings which I have done here. So stamen consists of the anther and the filament. Okay, this is the anther part and this is the filament part. Okay, and the stigma consists of, and the pistil, the pistil consists of the stigma, style and ovary. So this one is ovary, this long stem is the style, and this top part is the stigma. So stigma, style and ovary are the three main parts of pistil, whereas stamen has two parts, that is anther and filament. So this is the diagram of a structure of a typical flower. Learn it with proper labeling and with each and every part how it is labeled here. Okay, so learn it properly. So let us move on to the next one. Now here we should know that what is a complete flower. So if most of the flowers, they have 4 holes only, that are sepals, petals, androecium and gynoecium. So when they are having all these 4 holes, they are called complete flowers. So when they are having all these 4 holes, that is calyx, corolla, androecium and gynoecium, they are called complete flower. So this is an example of complete flower. I told you to learn this with diagram, with the labels and with all the parts with proper labeling. Please do learn this parts of a complete flower, and it is very important for your exams also. So this label diagram, either they'll give you a picture study, either they'll give you some parts, unlabel it parts and write the functions of each and individual part. So write like that only, you need to prepare for your exams. Now next comes that when both androecium and gynoecium are present in these flowers, they are called bisexual or hermaphrodite flowers. Like hibiscus, rose and petunia, they are bisexual and hermaphrodite. And we can say that these flowers, they have both the androecium and the gynoecium present. Now for example, we tell that if one flower is having only one part, either male or female part, that is called a incomplete flower. So either male or female flower part is present, that is called incomplete flower, or it is also called the unisexual flower. They can either be male, that is if they are having only the male part, that is called a staminate flower. So male part is there, that is called a staminate flower, that is papaya and maize. So this is an example of staminate flower. So this is a staminate flower, that is either the male part is present, that is the stamen part is only present, and if the female part is only present, that is the pistillate flower, that is female part is only present. So this one is the pistillate flower, only female part is present. Is it clear? Now there are flowers which have neither male part nor female part. So such flowers are called the neutral flowers. So neither male nor female, neither male part nor female part. Okay, so neither male nor female part is there. So they are called neutral flowers. Like ray florets of sunflower, they are neither male parts are present nor female part are present. So let us move on to how these flowers are being pollinated to give rise to sexual reproduction. So what is pollination? For the fusion of gametes, we can say that for the fusion of gametes to occur and seeds to be formed, pollen grains, they need to be pollen grains produced in the anther must be transferred to the stigma of the pistil. So the gametes need to fuse, the male and the female gametes need to fuse to form the we need to form the seed, right? So they need to form the fuse and they form the seed. So how they are producing that pollen grains produced in the anther, they must be transferred to the stigma of the pistil, right? So this process by which the pollen grains from the anther of a flower are transferred to the stigma of the same or another flower is called pollination. So the process by which the pollen grains from the anther of a flower are transferred to the stigma of the same or another flower is called pollination. So pollination, it occurs naturally as well as artificially. So we will discuss the methods of pollination, how they occur naturally as well as artificially. So first we are going to discuss here about what is self-pollination and what is cross-pollination. So the process of transfer of the pollen grains from the anthers to the stigma of the same flower or another flower of the same plant. So that is self-pollination. So from the anther to the stigma of the same flower or flower of the same plant is called self-pollination. So from the anther to the stigma of the same flower is called, this is the self-pollination. So if you are seeing this diagram, just observe that it is being taken from the anther of the flower to the stigma of the same flower. So this is self-pollination, and the process of transfer of pollen grains from the anthers of the flower to the stigma of another plant of the same species is called cross-pollination. So these two are the flowers of the same species, right? So the anther from the anther of the one flower, the pollen grains are carried to the stigma of another flower. So this process is called the cross-pollination. So if it is happening within the same flower, same plant, that is self-pollination. Self means within its own plant or within the same flower itself. So the flowers which are bisexual, they carry both the male and the female parts. So from the anther of that flower only to the stigma of that flower, it is carried, and within the same plant also, from the anther of the same flower, from the same plant flower to the stigma of the same plant flower. So that is self-pollination. And when this happens from one plant to another of the same species, it is called cross-pollination. So I think this is clear. Now we will move to the agents of pollination. Now first important thing is the pollination by insects. So pollination by insects is called entomophily. So what is happening here? The insects are acting as the agents which are carrying the pollen grain from one plant to the another. So generally bees and butterflies, they visit to collect the nectar, and when they are collecting nectar, in this process what happens? The pollen grains, they get stuck to their body. So pollen grains, they are sticky in nature and they are sticking to the body of these insects. Now when these insects, they again visit to another flower, the pollen grains which were stuck to their body while sucking the nectar, they are being transferred to the stigma of that flower. So like that only the flowers are getting pollinated, and flower pollinated by insects are generally very large in size, and they are brightly colored, okay, and they are always having a sweet smell. They are large, they are brightly colored, and they are having sweet smell, so that the insects are getting attracted to these flowers for sucking the nectar. Then only if they are getting attracted, if they are brightly colored, if they are having that sweet smell, only the insects will get attracted and they will sit on that, and the pollen will stick to it, and when they come and sit in the stigma of another flower, these pollens, they drop down, and these are sweet smelling, and pollen grains and the stigma, most of these flowers are very sticky, so that they should stick to the body of the insect, right? So if they are sticking to the body of the insect only, they will get carried to another plant for this process of pollination. Now next comes pollination by wind. Now this pollination of wind, what is it called? This is called anemophily. First one was called entomophily, that is pollination by insects, and this is called anemophily. Now flowers of the plants, such as we can say that these happen in rice, maize and grasses, and most of the wind pollinated flowers, they are very small and they have dry and light pollen grains, okay. They are very small in nature and they have dry and small light pollen grains, so that they can be easily carried by wind. Why these grains are small and dry? Because they can be easily carried by wind, okay. The pollen grains are produced in very large quantities, so that at least some have the chance to reach the stigma. So they are produced in very large quantities, so that at least some have the chance to reach the stigma. So the style, it actually projects out, and has a large feathery stigma, so that the pollen flying in wind can be easily received. Is it clear? So the pollen is flying in the wind. It is a wind pollinated flower. It is pollinated by wind. So the pollen which is flying in wind can be easily received. So the style is always large. We can say that it is projecting out large, and it is having a feathery stigma, so that to receive the pollens which are being flying in wind. Now after this pollination by winds, there is another important type of pollination. It is by water. Now pollination by water is called hydrophily. Now hydrophily, as the water hydro, it relates to water only. We know that it occurs in aquatic plants only, like hydrilla and vallisneria, and flowers are very light and they can easily float on the surface of water. So flowers are very light and they can easily float on the surface of water. they do not produce nectar. These flowers, they do not produce nectar actually. Now the male and the female flowers, we can say that they are usually produced on separate plants. So male and the female flowers, they are always produced mainly on separate plants, and here also the pollen grains are produced in large quantities. Now if you see the diagram, you can observe one thing, that this is a Vallisneria plant, right? The male flower is submerged under water, okay, and we can say that the female flower on the maturity, it is getting detached and it will float on the water, and we can see that here these are the female flower which is having a long stalk, and that too it is floating on the surface of the water. And the male flower, when it comes in contact with the female flower, it gets the pollen grains get deposited on the stigma. Okay, so the pollen grains are deposited on the stigma. So when this female flower is getting detached from this, the pollen grains are getting deposited on the stigma, and thus pollination occurs. Okay, so we can say that in Vallisneria, the male flower is always submerged, and on maturity it is getting detached, and the female flower is having a long stalk. And when the male flower comes in contact with the female flower, what will happen? The pollen grains are deposited on the stigma, and thus the pollination is occurring. So this is the process of pollination by water, and we have already told the flowers are very light and they are easily floating on water, and the pollen grains are produced in large numbers, so that little bit of it can be deposited on this female flowers for the process of this transfer should be so that the transfer large quantities, because the transfer of little bit of pollen grains also could be done by the this process of pollination. Is it clear? Now we will move on to pollination by insects. Now this is the last type of pollination, that is pollination by animals. Now birds, squirrels and bats, they are all acting as the agents of pollination, and they suck nectar from the flowers, and flowers are usually large and bright in color and growing on tall trees. Like we can say that in such cases the flowers are usually large, bright colors and growing on tall trees. For example, the silk cotton tree. And we can say that birds, squirrels and bats, they are acting as the agents of pollination. When they suck the nectar from the flowers, they are some part of the pollen is getting stuck to their body, and which is being carried to the stigma of another flower. The same process continues in case of pollination by insects, water, wind or animals. So it's being carried from one pollens are being carried from the stamens to the stigma. Okay, so the process is same for the process of fertilization. Now we will move on to the next part. Now till now we were studying about the natural methods of pollination. So this is the artificial method, how it is performed. Let us see how. So why is artificial pollination performed? Now it is performed to produce a new variety of plant with certain required characteristics. Okay, so if this is artificial, anything which is done artificially, it's with the help of human hands only. The human only can do this artificially, right? And they are producing a new variety of plant with certain required characteristics. So this is the artificial pollination method. So what is being done here? Now in artificial pollination, we can say that during artificial pollination, first we are removing the stamens of a bisexual flower before they are mature. So we are removing the stamens from a bisexual flower. And what is happening then? This flower with the gynoecium so stamen is removed, that is the male part is removed, and the gynoecium, it is preserved, it is covered in a muslin bag, and to prevent any type of natural pollination. Okay, so when the stigma of this flower, it matures, so as it was preserved in a muslin bag, when it was matured, when the pollen grains from another plant variety, they are taken and deposited in this stigma. So when we see that after putting that in a muslin bag, after certain period of time, when the stigma matures, what we will do, we will bring the pollen grains from another plant. We are selecting the pollens from another plant and putting them to the stigma of this plant, and they are deposited on the stigma. So the seeds are produced after artificial pollination. They are a new variety. So seeds produced by this process are having a new variety. Okay, and they are new variety and they are hybrid. So they are new variety and they are hybrid in nature, and this process is also called hybridization. This process is also called hybridization, as the new plant which is produced is the hybrid of this plant and this plant. So this is a method of hybridization. So we will see the process in details in the next slide. Now what I have told in the previous slide only, here I have written down in the form of points. So what is artificial pollination? The stamens of the bisexual flower, they are removed before the anthers are mature. Now then what we are doing with the flower? The flower is with gynoecium intact is then covered with a paper or a muslin bag to prevent the natural pollination. Is it clear? Now till now we are after the stamens are being removed, we are putting the flower in a muslin bag or a paper bag with a gynoecium intact. So when the stigma of this flower again it is mature, the pollen grains from another flower selected plant, they are taken and deposited on this stigma. So the pollen grains are from the another different plant and they are deposited in the stigma of this plant, because we have removed already the stamen of this flower. So this flower cannot produce pollen grains of its own, because before maturity only we have removed the stamens and we are keeping the stigma intact, so that the pollen grains we are bringing from another plant and depositing it into this plant. Now the seeds produced after artificial pollination, they are giving rise to a new variety of plant which is better than the parent plant. So this new variety of plant is having high yielding, it is having a better quality, and it is having a disease resistant characteristic. So this process is called hybridization, and the new variety what is formed is called a hybrid plant. So the process is called hybridization and the new variety formed is called hybrid plant. Is it clear? So till now I think all the things which I have taught is very clear. Now we are here with a few questions which you will write. So it's a homework. So what is the homework? It is very important question. So you should write the difference between the insect pollinated flowers and the wind pollinated flower. And you should be able to write the difference between self-pollinated and cross-pollinated flowers. So please do write these two questions. And another one is also there. Why is sexual reproduction superior to asexual reproduction? Just write these answers. Keep it in your answer book, and if you are having any doubts, I'll be discussing the answers in the next class, next video. So till then you get ready with your answer, so that if you are having any queries you can ask me, right? So why is sexual reproduction superior to asexual reproduction? Difference between insect pollinated and wind pollinated flowers, and what is the difference between the self pollination and cross-pollinated flowers. So these are very important questions, and till this only today's topic I am ending, because next topic we will be doing the fertilization process full, with the seed germination, seed formation, and the germination of seeds. So that is also a topic which needs to be understood. So this is already a vast topic I have discussed. So in the next upcoming video I will be discussing with fertilization, formation of seed, and germination of seeds. Okay, so please stay tuned, subscribe to my channel for the coming updates, whatever I am posting, and don't forget to write your comments, queries in the comment box, and please come up with the answers when I am starting with the next episode. Thank you.